The blood on Ryder Nelson's hands wasn't his own, and that was the problem that sent him riding hard across the California desert with everything he owned tied to his horse, and the smell of gunpowder still clinging to his clothes. He had fired in self-defense when 3 drifters tried to steal his cattle under the cover of darkness. But the youngest one hadn't been as quick to draw as his companions, and Ryder's bullet had found him anyway. The boy couldn't have been more than 19, and the look in his eyes as he fell haunted Ryder more than any ghost ever could. So he left the ranch he had built with his own 2 hands over the past 6 years, left it all behind without looking back, because staying there meant seeing that boy's face every time he closed his eyes. The year was 1883, and the desert stretched endlessly before him as he rode toward Panamint, California, a silver mining town nestled in the Panamint Mountains that he had heard was booming with opportunity. Ryder was 28 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had built his ranch from nothing after his father died, worked himself to the bone to make it profitable, and now he was leaving it all to his younger brother without explanation. The guilt of that shooting was a weight he couldn't carry while standing on land that reminded him of violence. Panamint appeared on the horizon like a mirage, buildings clustered against the mountainside, the sound of stamp mills crushing ore echoing across the valley. Ryder rode down the main street, noting the saloons and general stores, the crowds of miners and merchants going about their business. The town had sprung up just 9 years earlier when silver was discovered, and it showed in the hastily constructed buildings and the raw energy that seemed to pulse through every interaction. He found a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come to California during the gold rush decades earlier. She looked him over with shrewd eyes and quoted him a price that was fair. Ryder paid for a week in advance and asked where he might find work that didn't involve mining. "The general store, Mrs. Chen said in accented but clear English. "The owner's daughter runs it mostly now. Her father's health is failing. She might need help." The general store was a large wooden building near the center of town, its windows displaying everything from mining equipment to fabric to canned goods. Ryder tied his horse outside and stepped through the door, a bell jingling above his head. The interior was packed with merchandise, organized with surprising efficiency. Behind the counter stood a young woman with copper-colored hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face dusted with freckles, her green eyes focused intently on a ledger. She looked up at the sound of the bell, and Ryder felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, but not in the delicate way some women were. There was strength in the set of her jaw, intelligence in her eyes, and a wariness that suggested she had learned not to trust easily. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice pleasant but businesslike. "I'm looking for work," Ryder said, removing his hat. "I heard you might need help here." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his dusty clothes and the careful way he held himself. "What's your name?" "Ryder Nelson. Clara Owens," she said. "This is my father's store, but I run it now." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything honest," Ryder said. "I can lift heavy loads, do carpentry, keep books if needed. I owned a cattle ranch up north until recently." "Why'd you leave?" The question was direct, and Ryder appreciated that. He had prepared for this. Needed a change. "Ranching wasn't sitting right with me anymore." Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press. "I could use someone to help with inventory and deliveries. The mining camps in the hills need regular supplies, and I can't leave the store unattended to make deliveries myself." "Can you handle a wagon?" "Yes, madam. It's Clara, not madam. I'm 24, not ancient." A hint of humor touched her lips. The pay is decent and you'd work 6 days a week, Sundays off. That sounds fine. You start tomorrow at dawn, don't be late." Ryder nodded, placed his hat back on his head, and left. As he walked back to the boarding house, he felt the first small easing of the tension he had carried for weeks. Maybe here, in this bustling mining town, he could rebuild himself into someone who didn't see death every time he closed his eyes. The next morning, Ryder arrived at the store just as the sun was painting the mountains gold. Clara was already there, a lamp burning inside, and she had a list prepared of supplies that needed to be delivered to 3 different mining camps. She showed him where the wagon was kept behind the store and helped him load it, working with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. "The camps pay on delivery," she explained, handing him receipts. "Don't let them short you. Some of them will try." "Understood." "And Ryder," she met his eyes, "if anyone gives you trouble, you come back and tell me. Don't start any fights. This town has enough violence without adding to it." He wondered if she somehow sensed what he was running from, but her expression was neutral. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Good." The deliveries took most of the day. The mining camps were rough affairs, clusters of tents and crude shelters where men worked themselves to exhaustion chasing silver. Ryder collected payment without incident, though a few miners tested him with aggressive posturing. He remained calm, completed his business, and returned to Panamint by late afternoon. Clara was serving a customer when he entered, and she glanced up with what might have been relief. When the customer left, she came over to check the receipts and money he handed her. "No problems?" she asked. "None. That's unusual. The last man I hired came back with a black eye his first day." She counted the money efficiently. "You did well. Same thing tomorrow, different camps." Over the following weeks, Ryder fell into a rhythm. He made deliveries, helped with inventory, repaired shelves and furniture when needed, and gradually became an essential part of the store's operation. Clara was a demanding but fair employer, and he found himself looking forward to the conversations they shared during quiet moments. He learned that her father, Thomas Owens, had been a prospector who struck it moderately rich and used the money to open the store. But he had developed a lung condition from years of breathing rock dust, and now he spent most days in the apartment above the store, too weak to work. Clara had essentially been running the business for the past 2 years, and she did it with remarkable skill. "Most people in this town see me as Thomas Owens' daughter," she told Ryder one afternoon while they were organizing a shipment of canned goods. "They don't take me seriously as a businesswoman. I have to work twice as hard to get half the respect." "You've earned it," Ryder said. "This store runs better than most I've seen." She gave him a surprised look as if compliments were rare. "Thank you." He wanted to ask about her life, about whether there was someone courting her, but it felt too personal. Instead, he focused on his work and tried not to notice how the lamplight caught in her copper hair or how her laugh sounded when something genuinely amused her. One evening, about 6 weeks after Ryder had started working at the store, Clara asked him to stay after closing. He helped her lock up, and she led him upstairs to the apartment where she lived with her father. Thomas Owens was a thin man with gray hair and a persistent cough, propped up in a chair by the window. His eyes, though, were sharp and assessing. "So you're the one Clara's been talking about," Thomas said, his voice raspy. "Father," Clara said, a warning in her tone. "What?" "I can't meet the man who's made such a difference in how you run things." Thomas coughed into a handkerchief. "Sit down, Nelson. Clara says you're from up north. What brought you to Panamint?" Ryder sat, aware of both of them watching him. "I needed a fresh start, running from something." "Father, it's all right," Ryder said quietly. He met Thomas's eyes. "I was a rancher. There was violence on my property. Someone died. It was self-defense, but it didn't matter. I couldn't stay there anymore. The honesty seemed to surprise both of them. Clara's expression softened and Thomas nodded slowly. "That's the most honest answer anyone's given in this town in years," Thomas said. "Most people lie about their pasts. I appreciate a man who tells the truth." He coughed again, longer this time. When he recovered, he looked at Clara. "I like him." "I'm glad," Clara said dryly. Thomas turned back to Ryder. "My daughter's too stubborn to admit she needs help, but she does. This store is too much for one person, especially with me being useless. If you're planning to stay in Panamint, I'd like to make you a partner. 20% of the profits, and your name on the deed alongside ours." Ryder's breath caught. "Mr. Owens, that's very generous, but I've only been here 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, profits have increased because deliveries are reliable and we can take on more customers. I've been in business long enough to know value when I see it." Thomas looked between Ryder and Clara. "Besides, Clara needs someone she can rely on, someone with integrity." Clara was looking at the floor, her cheeks slightly flushed. Ryder realized this conversation had been her idea as much as her father's. "I accept," Ryder said, "and I promise I'll honor your trust." They drew up papers the next day with the town's lawyer, a meticulous man named Henderson who asked pointed questions before declaring everything legal and binding. Ryder signed his name and felt the weight of ownership settle on his shoulders. It was different from the ranch, but it felt right. He was building something again, but this time with people beside him instead of alone. As the partnership solidified, Ryder's relationship with Clara shifted. They were no longer just employer and employee, but equals working toward a common goal. She began asking his opinion on business decisions, and they spent long evenings going over accounts and planning expansion. The store was doing well enough that they discussed opening a second location, or perhaps branching into other goods. During these late-night planning sessions, Ryder found himself noticing things about Clara that had nothing to do with business. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. The passion in her voice when she talked about her dreams for the store. He was falling for her, and that terrified him. He hadn't allowed himself to feel anything for anyone in years. After his mother died when he was 17, he had poured everything into the ranch, into building something that would last. There had been women, brief encounters that never went anywhere because he couldn't open himself up. But Clara was different. She was working her way past his defenses without even trying. The problem was he had no idea if she felt anything for him. Summer deepened into fall, and Panamint's desert heat gave way to cooler nights. The mining town continued to boom and the store prospered. Ryder moved out of Mrs. Chen's boarding house and into a small house he rented near the edge of town. It was modest but his own, and he spent his Sundays fixing it up and making it comfortable. One Sunday afternoon in October, Clara appeared at his door carrying a basket. She looked uncertain, which was unusual for her. "I thought you might like some company," she said. "And I baked bread this morning. Father's asleep, and I was going stir-crazy in that apartment." "Come in," Ryder said, stepping aside. She entered and looked around at the sparse furniture and the half-finished carpentry projects. "You're good with your hands. Had to be, running a ranch." She set the basket on the table and pulled out not just bread but cheese, dried fruit, and a bottle of wine. "I thought we could have lunch." They sat together at his small table, and for the first time, they talked about things that had nothing to do with business. Clara told him about growing up in the mining camps, about her mother who had died of fever when Clara was 12, about the loneliness of being a woman in a town full of men who saw her as either a commodity or an oddity. I always wanted more than this, she said, gesturing vaguely. Not more than the store, I love the store. But more than just being Thomas Owen's daughter, I wanted to be seen as myself. I see you, Ryder said quietly. Her eyes met his, and something electric passed between them. She reached across the table and touched his hand, her fingers warm against his skin. I know you do, she whispered. That's why I'm here. Ryder turned his hand to clasp hers. Clara, I need to tell you something about why I really left the ranch. You said someone died. 3 men tried to steal my cattle. I shot them. 2 of them died immediately. The third was young, maybe 19. He wasn't as quick as his friends, and I shot him while he was still trying to draw. He died slowly. Ryder's voice was rough. I see his face every night. I left because I couldn't bear to be on that land anymore, knowing I had killed someone who might not have even wanted to be there. Clara's grip on his hand tightened. You were defending what was yours. Doesn't make it easier. No, she agreed. But it wasn't murder. And you leaving everything behind, that shows who you are. A man who values life even when it costs him everything. Ryder looked at their joined hands. I never thought I'd feel at home anywhere again. But here, working with you, building something together. Clara, you've become home to me in a way no place ever was. She stood, still holding his hand, and moved around the table to stand beside him. Ryder rose, and they were inches apart, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window and illuminating her face. I was so lonely before you came, Clara said. I didn't even realize how lonely until you were there every day, making everything better, making everything possible. Ryder lifted his free hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Can I kiss you, please? He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but she rose to meet him. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative and questioning. Then Clara's arms came around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of months of denied attraction and growing affection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Ryder rested his forehead against hers. I'm in love with you, he said. I know it's fast, but it's true. It's not that fast, Clara said, smiling. I've been falling for weeks. I was just too scared to admit it. They spent the rest of that Sunday afternoon together, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. When Clara finally left as the sun was setting, Ryder stood in his doorway and watched her walk back toward town. And for the first time since the shooting, he felt truly at peace. Their courtship was the talk of Panamint within days. In a town where privacy was nearly impossible, their romance became public knowledge quickly. Most people seemed pleased. Clara was well-liked despite the challenges she faced as a businesswoman, and Ryder had earned respect for his steady work and honest dealings. But not everyone was happy about it. A mine owner named Victor Hastings had been trying to court Clara for months, bringing her gifts and making grand gestures that she politely but firmly rebuffed. He was a wealthy man in his 40s, used to getting what he wanted, and he did not take well to Clara's relationship with Ryder. Hastings confronted Ryder one afternoon at the saloon where Ryder occasionally had a beer after work. The older man was drunk and belligerent. You think you can just come into this town and take what's mine? Hastings demanded, swaying slightly. Clara isn't property, Ryder said calmly. She's not yours or anyone else's. She makes her own choices. She was supposed to marry me. I could give her everything. You're just some drifter with nothing. I'm a partner in her store and the man she loves, Ryder said. That's all that matters. Hastings lunged forward, but he was too drunk to land a blow. Ryder caught his arm and guided him into a chair. Go home and sleep it off. The bartender and several other patrons were watching. One of them, a miner named Jack, clapped Ryder on the shoulder. You handled that well. Hastings has been a problem for a while now. I don't want trouble, Ryder said. Sometimes trouble finds us anyway, Jack replied. Ryder told Clara about the confrontation that evening. They were in the store after closing, going over inventory, and she listened with growing concern. Hastings won't let this go, she said. He's used to bullying people until he gets his way. I won't let him hurt you. I'm not worried about me, I'm worried about you. She came around the counter and took his hands. Ryder, I don't want you fighting my battles. We're partners. Your battles are mine. That's not what I mean. I spent years proving I could handle things myself. I don't want to be seen as someone who needs a man to protect her. Ryder considered this. What if we protect each other? I'm not trying to take over your life, Clara, but I love you, and that means standing beside you when things get difficult. Her expression softened. Beside me, I like that. They decided to be cautious around Hastings, but not to let him dictate their lives. The relationship between Ryder and Clara continued to deepen. They began talking seriously about marriage, about combining their lives fully rather than just their business interests. On a cool November evening, Ryder took Clara out to a spot in the desert where they could see the stars spread across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. He had brought blankets and food, and they sat together while the night sounds of the desert surrounded them. I never asked you about the ranch, Clara said, leaning against his shoulder. Do you miss it? Ryder was quiet for a moment. I miss the work sometimes, the satisfaction of building something with your hands, but the ranch was never really home. It was just a place I worked myself to death trying to prove something. Prove what? That I was worth something, that I could succeed where my father struggled, that I could build a legacy. He turned to look at her. But I learned something these past months. A place is just land and buildings. What makes it home is the people you share it with. Clara's eyes were bright in the starlight. Is that what I am to you? Home. You're my home now, not the land, not the ranch I left behind, not even Panamint, just you. Ryder pulled a small box from his pocket. Which is why I want to ask you to marry me. Not because I need a wife to make a house into a home, but because you are my home, Clara. Wherever you are, that's where I belong. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Ryder opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small emerald. It's not much, he said, but the stone matches your eyes. It's perfect, Clara whispered. Yes, Ryder, yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed under the vast desert sky. When they finally pulled apart, Clara was laughing through her tears. I can't believe this is happening, she said. I thought I'd spend my whole life alone, married to the store and nothing else. You'll never be alone again, Ryder promised. I'm not going anywhere. They set a date for the wedding in mid-December, wanting Thomas to be well enough to attend, but not wanting to wait too long. The preparations kept them both busy and excited. Clara ordered fabric from San Francisco for her dress, and the women of Panamint, who had initially been wary of her independence, rallied around her with surprising enthusiasm. Mrs. Chen offered to host the wedding reception at her boarding house. Jack the miner and several other men offered to help Ryder expand his small house into something suitable for a married couple. Even the town's minister, Reverend Walsh, seemed genuinely pleased to be performing the ceremony, but the happiness was shadowed by Thomas's declining health. He was fading more each day, his coughs becoming weaker rather than stronger, his appetite disappearing. The doctor told Clara privately that her father might not live to see spring. Clara told Ryder one night in his arms, both of them lying in his bed where she had begun staying more frequently despite the scandal it might have caused. He wants to see me married before he dies. He told me so today. Then we'll make sure the wedding is beautiful, Ryder said, stroking her hair. He'll be proud of you. He already is. He told me you were the best thing that ever happened to me." She looked up at Ryder. He was right. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and work. The store continued to thrive, and Ryder hired an additional assistant to help with deliveries so he could focus on expanding the house. With Jack's help, and that of several other miners who had become friends, they added 2 rooms and a proper kitchen. Victor Hastings remained a looming threat, but he seemed to have backed off after the confrontation at the saloon. Ryder hoped the man had accepted reality and moved on, but Clara remained cautious. "Men like Hastings don't give up," she said. "They just wait for the right moment." She was proven right a week before the wedding. Ryder was making a late delivery to one of the mining camps when he was ambushed by 3 men wearing bandanas over their faces. They pulled him from the wagon and began beating him, and through the pain, Ryder recognized their builds. One of them was definitely Hastings, the others his hired men. "Stay away from Clara Owens," Hastings snarled, his voice muffled by the bandana. "She's mine, and I'm not letting some drifter take what I deserve." They left Ryder bleeding in the dirt and took the wagon. He managed to stagger back to Panamint on foot, arriving after midnight. Clara was waiting at the store, frantic with worry, and she cried out when she saw his condition. "Who did this?" she demanded as she cleaned his wounds. "Hastings and 2 of his men." Ryder winced as she touched a particularly deep cut. "He told me to stay away from you, that son of a—" Clara's hands were shaking with fury. "I'm going to the sheriff right now." "Wait," Ryder caught her hand. "We need proof they were masked. You recognize them." "My word against a rich mine owners. Who do you think the sheriff will believe?" Clara's face was a mask of frustration. "So we do nothing. We be smart." Ryder pulled her close despite the pain. "We get married as planned, we show him he can't intimidate us, and we stay alert." It wasn't a satisfying solution, but it was practical. They filed a report with the sheriff anyway, and the lawman promised to look into it, though his skeptical expression suggested he wouldn't try very hard. The attack had bruised Ryder's ribs and given him a black eye, but nothing was broken. Clara insisted he rest for the next few days, and she ran the store with the help of their new assistant, a young man named Peter who was eager but still learning. During those days of recovery, Ryder had time to think. He realized that despite everything, despite Hastings and the violence and the echoes of his past, he was happy. Truly happy in a way he had never been before. Clara was everything to him, and the life they were building together was worth fighting for. The day of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the desert air sharp and bright. Ryder stood in Reverend Walsh's small church, wearing his best suit, which wasn't very fine but was clean and pressed. Jack stood beside him as best man, and a collection of miners and townspeople filled the pews. Then Clara appeared in the doorway on her father's arm, and Ryder forgot to breathe. She wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself with help from Mrs. Chen, and her copper hair was loose around her shoulders, threaded with small white flowers. She was radiant, smiling through happy tears as Thomas slowly walked her down the aisle. Thomas was painfully thin, but he held himself upright with visible pride. When they reached the altar, he placed Clara's hand in Ryder's and whispered something that only they could hear. "Take care of my girl," Thomas said, his voice barely audible. "She's the best thing I ever did in this world." "I promise," Ryder said, and he meant it with everything in him. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Reverend Walsh spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through hardship and joy. When it came time for the vows, Ryder's voice was steady and sure. "Clara, I came to Panamint running from my past and not knowing what I was looking for, but I found it in you. You gave me purpose and hope and a reason to believe in tomorrow. I promise to love you, to stand beside you, to build our life together with honesty and care. You're my home now, not the land I left behind, not any place or thing, just you. Always you." Clara was crying openly now. "Ryder, you walked into my store and changed everything. You saw me not as someone's daughter or someone to be conquered, but as myself. You gave me partnership and respect and a love I never thought I'd have. I promise to cherish you, to build our dreams together, to be your home just as you are mine. I love you with everything I am." When Reverend Walsh pronounced them married and told Ryder he could kiss his bride, the church erupted in applause. Ryder pulled Clara close and kissed her deeply, sealing their promises before God and their community. The reception at Mrs. Chen's boarding house was lively and joyful. There was food and music, and even Thomas seemed revived by the happiness around him. He sat in a comfortable chair that had been brought out for him and watched his daughter dance with her new husband, his face peaceful. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Thomas called Ryder over. Clara came too, and they sat on either side of the old man. "I want you both to know something," Thomas said, his voice weak but clear. "I can die happy now. Clara, you were always stronger and smarter than I ever was. This store, this life you have built, it's all you. And Ryder, you're the son I never had. I'm grateful you found each other." "Father, don't talk like that," Clara said, but her voice was thick with unshed tears. "I have to, sweetheart. We all know I'm not long for this world." Thomas took each of their hands. "Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll keep building and growing and living fully." "We promise," they said together. Thomas smiled. "Good. Now go enjoy your wedding night. I'm tired and need to sleep." They helped him back to the apartment above the store, and Mrs. Chen promised to check on him in the morning. Then Ryder carried Clara across the threshold of their expanded house, both of them laughing despite the emotional weight of the evening. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a celebration of their love and commitment. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Clara traced the fading bruises on Ryder's ribs from Hastings's attack. "I was so scared I'd lose you," she whispered. "When you didn't come back that night, I thought something terrible had happened." "I'm not going anywhere," Ryder said, kissing her forehead. "You're stuck with me now. Good." They fell asleep tangled together, safe and content in their new life. Thomas died 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. Clara found him in the morning, and though she had known it was coming, the grief still hit her hard. Ryder held her while she cried, and he made all the arrangements for the funeral while she struggled with her loss. The funeral was well attended. Thomas had been respected in Panamint, and many people came to pay their respects. Even Victor Hastings appeared, though he had the decency to keep his distance. Ryder watched him carefully, but the mine owner made no trouble. After the funeral, Clara threw herself into work, using it to manage her grief. Ryder understood and gave her space while still being present when she needed him. The store became solely theirs now, though they kept Thomas's name on the sign as a tribute. One evening in late January, Clara came home and collapsed in Ryder's arms. "I miss him so much," she said. "I keep thinking I need to tell him something, and then I remember he's gone." "That's grief," Ryder said gently. "It gets easier, but it never fully goes away. You just learn to carry it." "Is that how you feel about the ranch? About the men you shot?" Ryder considered this. "Yes and no. I regret that they died, especially the young one, but I don't miss the ranch itself anymore. I thought leaving it would haunt me forever, but it doesn't." "Because you're right here and you're all that matters." Clara pulled back to look at him. "Do you ever think about going back, seeing your brother checking on the land?" "Sometimes. Maybe someday we could travel up there together, but it's not urgent. My home is here now, with you." "You keep saying that," Clara said, a small smile touching her lips. That I'm your home, because it's true. The ranch was just dirt and wood and livestock. It wasn't home even when I lived there. Home is this." He gestured at their house, their life together. "Home is waking up beside you every morning. It's working together at the store. It's planning our future. That's what home really is." "I love you," Clara said simply. "I love you too." As winter gave way to spring, life in Panamint continued its rough and tumble rhythm. The silver mines produced wealth for some and disappointment for others. The town grew and changed, and the store prospered under Clara and Ryder's joint management. They heard nothing more from Victor Hastings, who seemed to have finally accepted defeat. Ryder remained wary, but as months passed without incident, he began to relax. In April, Clara told Ryder she was pregnant. They were in their kitchen, and she had just finished being sick in the basin. Ryder held her hair back and rubbed her back, concerned. "How long have you been ill?" he asked. "A few weeks. But Ryder, I'm not ill, I'm pregnant." He froze, his hand stilling on her back. "Pregnant, are you sure?" "I've missed my monthly courses twice, and I feel exactly like my mother described feeling when she was carrying me." Clara turned to face him, wiping her mouth. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Ryder lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing. "Clara, I'm thrilled. We're going to have a baby," she laughed too, holding on to him. "Put me down before you make me sick again." He set her down carefully, then knelt and placed his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I'm your father, and I already love you more than I thought possible." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. They had talked about wanting children, but she hadn't expected it to happen so soon. Now that it had, she felt a fierce joy mixed with terror at all the ways this could go wrong. "I'm scared," she admitted. "My mother died of fever, and childbirth is dangerous." Ryder stood and pulled her close. "We'll get the best doctor available. We'll be careful. And you're strong, Clara, stronger than anyone I know." "Promise me something," she said against his chest. "If something happens to me during the birth, promise you'll take care of our baby. Promise you won't let grief destroy you." "Nothing is going to happen to you. Promise me anyway." "I promise," Ryder said, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. He couldn't imagine losing her. She had become the center of his entire world. The pregnancy progressed well through spring and into summer. Clara worked at the store until she was so obviously pregnant that customers began insisting she rest more. Ryder hired additional help and took over more of the physical work, determined to make things easier for his wife. They spent long evenings preparing the nursery in what had been a storage room. Ryder built a cradle from scratch, carving careful details into the wood. Clara sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands busy while they talked about names and the future. "If it's a boy, I want to name him Thomas," Clara said, "after my father. And if it's a girl," I was thinking Rose. "It's not a family name, but I've always loved roses even though they don't grow well in the desert." "Thomas or Rose," Ryder said. "Both beautiful names." In August, when Clara was 7 months along, Victor Hastings made his final move. Ryder was at the store late, doing inventory while Clara rested at home. He heard the door open and looked up to see Hastings standing there, and he immediately knew something was wrong. The mine owner looked disheveled and desperate, and he was holding a gun. "Where's Clara?" Hastings demanded. "Not here." Ryder kept his voice calm, though his heart was racing. "Put the gun away, Hastings. I want to talk to her. I want to tell her she made a mistake choosing you. She's my wife and pregnant with my child. There's nothing to discuss." Hastings's face twisted with rage. "She was supposed to be mine. I offered her everything. I would have made her a queen in this town. She didn't want that. She wanted partnership and respect, and that's what we have." Ryder took a careful step forward. "It's over, Hastings. Let it go." No. Hastings raised the gun, his hands shaking. You took everything from me. The door burst open, and Sheriff Morrison entered with 2 deputies. Someone must have seen Hastings enter with the gun and alerted the law. The sheriff had his own gun drawn. Put it down, Hastings, Morrison ordered. Don't make this worse. For a long moment, Hastings kept the gun trained on Ryder. Then slowly he lowered it and let it fall to the floor. His face crumpled and he began to sob. She was supposed to love me, he said brokenly. I did everything right. The deputies took him into custody and Sheriff Morrison came over to check on Ryder. Are you all right, son? I'm fine. Ryder was shaking with adrenaline. What will happen to him? Threatening someone with a gun is a serious crime. He'll likely face trial and imprisonment. Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. Go home to your wife. She doesn't need to know about this tonight. But Clara did need to know, and Ryder told her as soon as he got home. She listened with wide eyes, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. He could have killed you, she whispered. But he didn't, and now he'll face justice. Ryder pulled her into his arms as much as her belly allowed. It's really over now, Clara. We can finally put all of this behind us. Hastings was tried and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The trial revealed that he had been obsessed with Clara for much longer than anyone realized, and that he had a history of violent behavior that his wealth had allowed him to hide. With him gone, a weight lifted from both Ryder and Clara's shoulders. In October, as the desert air began to cool and the light took on that particular golden quality of autumn, Clara went into labor. It started in the morning with mild contractions that gradually intensified. Ryder sent for the doctor and Mrs. Chen, who had delivered many babies in her time. Then he stayed by Clara's side, holding her hand and talking to her through the pain. The labor was long and difficult. Clara labored through the day and into the night, and there were moments when Ryder was terrified they would lose her or the baby. But Dr. Harrison remained calm and encouraging, and Mrs. Chen's experienced hands guided the process. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry filled their home. Ryder watched through tears as the doctor held up a squirming, angry infant. It's a boy, Dr. Harrison announced. A healthy, strong boy. Clara collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Clara's arms. Hello, Thomas, Clara whispered, looking down at her son. Hello, my beautiful boy. Ryder knelt beside the bed, looking at his wife and son with overwhelming love. The baby had a shock of dark hair in Clara's nose, and his tiny fists waved as he settled against his mother's chest. He's perfect, Ryder said, his voice choked with emotion. You're both perfect. Hold your son, Clara said, carefully transferring the baby to Ryder's arms. Ryder took the tiny weight, terrified he might do something wrong, but the baby settled immediately. Thomas looked up at him with unfocused eyes, and Ryder felt his heart expand in a way he never knew was possible. I left my ranch behind, Ryder said softly, speaking to his son. I left everything I thought mattered, and I found this instead. I found your mother, and now I have you. You're my home now, both of you, not land or buildings or any place, just this, just us. Clara reached out to touch his face, smiling despite her exhaustion. We're your home and you're ours. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Thomas was a good baby overall, but he still required constant attention. Clara and Ryder took turns with nighttime feedings, and they learned to function on very little sleep. The store continued to operate, but they adjusted their roles. Clara worked fewer hours, focusing on bookkeeping she could do from home, while Ryder managed more of the day-to-day operations with Peter's help. It wasn't always easy, but they made it work through communication and compromise. As Thomas grew, he became the delight of Panamint. Customers at the store always wanted to see him, and Mrs. Chen declared him the most beautiful baby she had ever seen. Even Jack and the other miners, rough men unused to children, softened around the baby. When Thomas was 6 months old, Ryder brought up the idea of visiting his old ranch. "I want to see my brother," he said to Clara one evening. "I want him to meet you and Thomas, and I think I'm ready to face that place again." "Are you sure?" Clara asked. "It's a long journey with a baby." "I know, but I feel like I need to close that chapter properly, and I want Robert to know I'm happy, that leaving was the right choice." They made the trip in early summer, when the weather was favorable. The journey took over a week by wagon, and Thomas was surprisingly good-natured about it all. They traveled through desert and grassland, and finally into the rolling hills where Ryder's ranch still operated. Robert Nelson had continued running the ranch, and he had expanded the operation significantly. When he saw Ryder riding up with Clara and the baby, he dropped the bridle he was holding and ran to meet them. The brothers embraced, and Ryder was surprised to find himself crying. "I'm sorry I left without explaining properly," he said. "I'm sorry I abandoned you." "You didn't abandon me," Robert said, pulling back to look at him. "You left me a letter explaining what happened with those drifters, and I understood. I've always understood." He looked at Clara and Thomas. "And I see you found what you needed." Ryder introduced Clara and their son, and Robert was immediately charmed by both. They stayed at the ranch for 3 days, and Ryder showed Clara where he had grown up, the land he had worked, the house where his parents had lived. "It's beautiful," Clara said, watching cattle graze in the distance. "I can see why you loved it." "I didn't love it," Ryder said, surprising himself with the realization. "I thought I did, but I was just trying to prove something. This place was never home. It was a burden I carried because I thought I was supposed to. And now I know what home really is. It's not a place. It's you and Thomas. It's the life we're building together in Panamint. That's home." On the last day of their visit, Ryder took Clara to the spot where the shooting had happened. The graves of the 3 drifters were marked with simple wooden crosses that Robert had erected. "I think about that young man sometimes," Ryder said, standing before the graves. "I wonder who he was, if he had family, if they ever learned what happened to him." Clara took his hand. "You can't carry that guilt forever, Ryder. What happened was tragic, but it wasn't murder. You were defending yourself and your property." "I know. And being here now, I finally believe that." He looked at her. "Thank you for helping me heal." They left the ranch the next day with Robert's blessing and promises to visit more often. As they rode away, Ryder looked back once at the land he had left behind, then turned forward to focus on his wife and son. The past was finally settled, and the future stretched before them full of possibility. The years that followed were good ones. The store continued to prosper, and Panamint, despite the boom and bust nature of mining towns, maintained a stable population. Ryder and Clara became pillars of the community, known for fair dealing and generosity. When Thomas was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Rose was born in the spring without complications. She had Clara's copper hair and Ryder's gray eyes, and Thomas adored his little sister from the first moment. "I can't believe we made these perfect little humans," Clara said one evening, watching Ryder play with both children in their parlor. "We did pretty well," Ryder agreed, letting Thomas climb on his back while Rose laughed from her blanket. As the children grew, Ryder found himself thinking often about the concept of home. He had left his ranch believing he would never feel settled anywhere again, but Clara had proven him wrong. She had shown him that home wasn't about land or buildings or even legacy. Home was about the people you loved and who loved you back. It was about building a life based on partnership and respect and genuine affection. Thomas started helping in the store when he was 8, showing a natural head for numbers and inventory. Rose, who was more adventurous, often disappeared into the desert to collect rocks and observe wildlife. They were different children, but both were deeply loved. One evening when Thomas was 10 and Rose was 7, the family sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. It had become a family tradition, this quiet time together at day's end. "Father," Thomas said, "why did you leave your old ranch? You never really told us the whole story." Ryder glanced at Clara, who nodded slightly. The children were old enough to understand now. "I left because I had to defend the ranch and someone died," Ryder said carefully. "It was the right thing to do at the time, but it haunted me. I couldn't stay there anymore." "Were you scared?" Rose asked. "Yes, I was scared and sad and lost. But then I came to Panamint and met your mother, and she showed me that home isn't a place, it's people." He looked at each of them. "You 3 are my home. Wherever we are together, that's where I belong." Thomas considered this seriously. "So when I grow up and have my own family, they'll be my home." "Exactly," Clara said. "Home is what you make it and who you choose to share your life with." The conversation moved on to other things, but Ryder sat quietly, holding Clara's hand and watching his children. He thought about the frightened man he had been when he first rode into Panamint, running from his past and unsure of his future. And he thought about everything that had happened since, all the love and growth and healing. The ranch he left behind was still there, still being worked by his brother. But it had never truly been his home. Home was here in this moment with these people. Clara had given him that gift when she chose to love him, and he had tried every day since to be worthy of it. Years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a young man who took over more responsibilities at the store. Rose became a teacher, bringing education to the children of Panamint's miners. Ryder and Clara grew older together, their hair graying but their love as strong as ever. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ryder took Clara back to the spot in the desert where he had proposed. They were both in their 40s now, marked by time and experience, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love over inventory and ledgers. "You have any regrets?" Clara asked, sitting on the blanket he had spread out. "Not a single one," Ryder said. "Leaving the ranch was the best decision I ever made. It brought me to you. And if you had stayed, built that ranch into an empire, I'd have been rich and miserable. The ranch was never what I needed. You are what I needed." He took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring. "You're my home now, not the land. That's as true today as it was the day I married you." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I love you, Ryder Nelson. I've loved you for 20 years, and I'll love you for 20 more. Only 20 more. I was hoping for at least 40. She laughed, and the sound carried across the desert. They sat together as the stars emerged, 2 people who had found in each other everything they needed. As Thomas and Rose grew into full adulthood, both eventually married and had children of their own. Ryder and Clara became grandparents, delighting in the new generation. The store was passed down to Thomas, who ran it with the same integrity his parents had shown, through it all, through every joy and sorrow, every challenge and triumph. Ryder never forgot the lesson Clara had taught him. Home wasn't about land or property or legacy measured in acres. Home was about love and partnership, about building a life with someone who saw you truly and chose you anyway. On their 40th anniversary, when both were in their 60s and their children were raising families of their own, Ryder and Clara sat on their porch watching another sunset. Their hands were weathered and spotted with age, but still firmly clasped together. "I'm dying, you know," Clara said quietly. She had been sick for months, a wasting illness that the doctor could not cure. "I know," Ryder said, his voice breaking. "Don't leave me." "I don't want to, but Ryder, listen to me." She turned to face him. "You gave me the most beautiful life. You showed me what it meant to be truly loved and respected. You were my partner in every way that mattered. You were everything to me. You are everything to me." "I know. And that's why I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, don't let grief destroy you. You told me once that I was your home, but you have other homes too. Our children, our grandchildren, the life we built together. They're all home. Promise me you'll keep living in it." "I don't know how to exist without you," Ryder said, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, you do. You're the strongest man I know." Clara wiped his tears with her thumb. "You left everything once to find yourself, and you found me instead. When I'm gone, you'll find yourself again. You'll find peace. I know you will." Clara passed away 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep with Ryder holding her hand. The funeral was the largest Panamint had ever seen, testament to how many lives she had touched. Ryder stood at the graveside with his children and grandchildren around him, and he felt the full weight of his loss. The months that followed were the hardest of Ryder's life. Without Clara, the house felt empty and wrong. He went through the motions of living, spending time with his family and helping at the store when Thomas needed him, but he felt hollowed out. One evening, about 6 months after Clara's death, Ryder was sitting on the porch alone when Rose came to visit. She sat beside him and took his hand. "Mother wouldn't want you to be like this," she said gently. "I know, but I don't know how to move forward. Do you remember what you always told us? That home is people, not places." "Yes, Mother was your home, but so are we, so are your grandchildren, so is everyone whose lives you touched." Rose squeezed his hand. "You're still home, Father. You're just learning to live in it differently." Her words echoed something Clara had said, and Ryder felt a shift inside him. His daughter was right. He was still home. Clara had been the center of it, but she had also helped him build something larger than just the two of them. Their children, the store, the community they had been part of for decades. All of that was home too. Slowly, painfully, Ryder began to heal. He spent more time with his grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother. He helped Thomas expand the store to include mail order services. He even traveled back to visit Robert's ranch one more time, finding that the old ghosts no longer haunted him. One day, about 2 years after Clara's death, Ryder was organizing some boxes in the attic when he found Clara's journal. She had kept one sporadically throughout their marriage, and he had never read it. Now, he opened it carefully and began to read. The entries detailed their life together from her perspective. She wrote about meeting him that first day, about the way he had made her feel seen and valued. She wrote about falling in love, about their wedding, about the births of their children. And near the end, written shortly before she died, was an entry addressed to him. "My dearest Ryder," it read. "If you are reading this, I am gone and you are grieving. I wish I could spare you that pain, but I cannot. What I can do is remind you of what you told me so many years ago. You said I was your home, not the land you left behind. That was the most romantic and truest thing anyone ever said to me. But here is what I want you to understand now. You were my home too. Every day with you was coming home, and even though I am gone, you still have a home. In our children and grandchildren, in the community we built, in the life we created together. Don't let grief make you forget that. Keep living in the home we built. That's how you honor what we had." Ryder closed the journal and wept, but they were healing tears. Clara was right, as she had always been. He was still home. She had helped him build it, and it continued to exist even in her absence. In the years that followed, Ryder found a new kind of peace. He never remarried, never wanted to, but he built a full life surrounded by family and purpose. He watched his grandchildren grow up, and even lived to see great-grandchildren born. The store that he and Clara had built together thrived under Thomas's management and eventually passed to one of the grandchildren. Panamint itself began to decline as the silver ran out, but many families stayed, including the Nelsons. They had deep roots there, built over decades of work and love and community. On Ryder's 80th birthday, surrounded by 3 generations of family, someone asked him what the secret to a good life was. Ryder thought about the ranch he had left behind at 28, running from guilt and pain. He thought about riding into Panamint and meeting a copper-haired woman who had changed everything. He thought about 40 years of marriage, of building a business and raising children and facing challenges together. And he thought about the years since Clara's death, learning to carry loss while still embracing life. The secret is knowing what home really is, he said. It's not land or buildings or wealth. It's people. It's love. It's finding someone who sees you truly and choosing to build a life with them. Everything else is just details. Thomas raised a glass. To home, he said. To home. Everyone echoed. Ryder looked around at all the faces, these people who existed because he and Clara had loved each other, and he felt that love radiating outward in ever-expanding circles. This was home. Not the ranch he left behind, not even the store or the house, but this. These connections, these relationships, this love that persisted beyond death. He had left his ranch behind and told Clara she was his home, and she had been. But she had also taught him that home could be bigger than just 2 people. It could be a family, a community, a legacy of love passed down through generations. Ryder Nelson lived to be 86 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, in the house he had shared with Clara. His last thoughts were of her, of riding into Panamint so many years ago, of the moment he first saw her behind that counter. He had been running from his past, but he had run straight into his future. At his funeral, Thomas spoke about his father's life. He talked about the ranch Ryder had left behind, about how that choice had taken courage. He talked about the love between Ryder and Clara, about how they had built something beautiful together. And he talked about the lesson Ryder had taught all of them, that home isn't a place, it's people. My father used to say that my mother was his home, not the land he left behind, Thomas told the gathered crowd. And she was. But he was also home to her, and together they created a home for all of us. That's the legacy he left. Not property or wealth, but love. Not land, but family. That's what home really is. The family buried Ryder next to Clara, their graves side by side under the desert sky. On his headstone, they carved a simple phrase that captured his entire life. He found his home, and indeed he had. Ryder Nelson had left everything behind and found not just a place or a business or even a new start. He had found love, partnership, family, and purpose. He had found home in Clara Owens, and together they had built something that lasted far beyond their lifetimes. Their great-great-grandchildren still live in California, still tell the story of the cowboy who left his ranch behind for love. The store eventually closed as Panamint faded, but the family remained, carrying forward the legacy of those 2 people who had loved each other so completely. Sometimes, when the desert wind blows through the old town, people say you can feel the presence of that love still. Not as something ghostly or unnatural, but as a reminder that the best things in life aren't owned or possessed. They're built together, person by person, choice by choice, day by day. Ryder left his ranch behind and told Clara she was his home. And in doing so, he discovered a truth that would resonate through generations. That home is never about the land beneath your feet, but always about the people standing beside you. It's about choosing love over property, partnership over possession, and connection over conquest. That was the truth that saved him when he rode into Panamint running from his guilt and his past. That was the truth that sustained him through 40 years of marriage. And that was the truth that comforted him in his final years, as he grieved his wife, but found home in the family they had created together. In the end, Ryder Nelson's life was a testament to the power of love to transform and heal. He started as a man defined by land and legacy, became a man defined by partnership and purpose, and ended as a man who understood that the only thing that truly matters in this life is the love we give and receive. The ranch he left behind still exists, passed down through his brother's line. But it was never Ryder's home, not really. His home was Clara. His home was the life they built together in Panamint. His home was the family they created and the love that continues to ripple outward through time. That's the story of how a cowboy left his ranch behind and told her, "You're my home now, not the land." And it's a story about how that simple truth, spoken from the heart, can change everything. It can heal old wounds, build new futures, and create a legacy that lasts long after the speakers are gone. Because in the end, we are all searching for home. And the luckiest among us discover that home isn't found in any place, but in the hearts of the people we love. That was Ryder Nelson's gift to his family, his community, and everyone who heard his story. That was what he learned when he left everything behind and rode into Panamint looking for a fresh start. He found so much more than that. He found everything that mattered. He found home.